Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I overcame chronic patterns of self-guilt. This is part of sort of a series I've been doing of more personal shares and just different life lessons and tools and sort of how I applied them and things to be aware of. And if this is something you struggle with, a lot of what I'm going to talk about in this video today is available in a course that I have that you can check out for free for 7 days called Overcome Chronic Guilt and Shame at the Subconscious Level. And you can use the link below if you want to access it. So this was a huge theme for me. And as many of you know, I used to be very fearful avoidant. That was my attachment style, my whole upbringing, and into my early adult life until I was about age 20 or so. And then did a lot of like deep inner work, probably became predominantly secure for a little while, but still with a secondary FA style. And then really put into the work in a relationship and then became fully securely attached. So guilt as a prior FA, it was a huge theme. And I had read about guilt and I knew okay, guilt, was something that really binds us to the past and there's lots of downsides and consequences of it. But I didn't become really motivated to work on guilt until I saw how much moving from guilt was basically synonymous to moving from fear in my life and making fear-based decisions in my life. And that was actually leading me to then have resentment and frustration in relationships and, be more likely to be burnt out on a regular basis. So I remember this really specific time, and it wasn't this huge deal or this monumental, big thing that happened, but it was very specific. And it was just kind of this little thing that kind of put me over the edge on a more personal level to want to pay attention to the pattern of guilt in my life. Now, I'd already been doing a lot of other healing in a lot of different areas. And I remember I was maybe a year into starting my practice. So, this is going on about 10 years ago or so. And I remember I was really tired. And I mentioned this on here at the time, or, other times. I was so excited to start my practice at first that I still had some boundary work to do. And I didn't really realize it for the first couple of years because I was so excited to work with people and share and do all these things. I didn't realize that oh, I'm still having some boundaries to hold up better. And I ended up overworking and taking on way too many clients for a period of time and things like this. So I remember it was a Sunday and I remember I was standing by this window and I lived at the time, maybe 2 hours away from my mom. And I remember she called me and was like, oh, can we get together? And it was kind of at the last minute. And I had plans, my Sunday afternoon was going to be a self-care day and I'm going to do things for myself and really try to recharge going back into the work week with all my clients and really needed that time. And I remember saying, no, I'm busy this afternoon. I can't see you, but let's figure out a time we can get together next. And she was away the next week or something like that. And then I had something the week after and it was going to be a while. And I remember I got off the phone and said, okay, let me just figure out what I can do. I'll call you right back. And I got off the phone and I felt all this guilt, oh, she's reaching out. She wants to spend time with me. And, I'm being selfish kind of idea is what I thought. Oh, it sounds like she needs some company or needs to see me and I should go there. And feeling really guilty about it, feeling really guilty about having said no. And I felt this kind of fear at the same time. And I remember as the fear came up, the fear, in real time, and mind you, I was meditating a lot at this time, a lot. And I was starting to get really in touch with my emotions in real time. And I remember this very vividly. I remember feeling the guilt and then feeling kind of this fear and feeling okay, I'm just going to call her and just go over there and I'll be fine. And as I went to do it, I kind of noticed that I'm felt fear, I guess fear of feeling guilty for a longer period of time, fear of feeling guilty for the next couple of weeks until I did finally go out and get to see her. And I remember thinking for a second, wow, I am actually reaching out to pick up the phone and call, moving from a fear of feeling guilty and as a strategy to avoid the pain of guilt, more than I am moving from a place of what's my truth right now. And my truth is, I feel like I'm kind of teetering on being overly exhausted and not being able to be properly recharged going back into my work week. Maybe that's something I have to address in a different way, like through better boundaries, for example. But I know right here, right now, if I go there and I spend all this time driving 2 hours out there, 2 hours back, and I really needed some time to myself, that I would be violating my own boundaries. And I'm doing this because I'm just trying to avoid the fear of feeling guilty, and realizing like, wow, how much do I actually do this in my life? And realizing like, well, what does that lead to? I'd probably feel guilty. And then the next time I'm in a situation like this, maybe I'm like, I'm not going out there because I felt so grumpy all week, or, whatever it might be. I didn't get to properly recharge, or whatever it might be. So I realized that like, oh, I was just moving straight from this place of being afraid. And then thinking, well, I'm still afraid of hurting my mom's feelings. And I had like a very enmeshed relationship to her when I was growing up, and not so much anymore, and really not that much at the time either back then. But obviously that was like a point that was easy for me to kind of fall back into, right? And I realized that something that was going to be so important for me was, if I was worried about hurting her feelings, I could say that. I could just vulnerably share and say, I feel bad, but here's where I'm at right now, and here's what's going on for me. And so that's what I did. So I called back and I said, hey, like, I'm feeling really guilty. Like, I feel badly because I can tell you're reaching out and you want to spend some time together. But like, I really planned this afternoon for myself to recharge, and I really need to recharge right now. Like, I feel like I didn't get a chance to recharge this whole week. Sorry, my phone's ringing. And I really need some time because of going back into my work week. Like, if we had planned ahead of time, I might have had more flexibility, and I feel badly. But why don't we just do like a really nice FaceTime chat on Wednesday evening or something like that? I have no idea when I actually planned for sorry, my phone keeps ringing. I have no idea when I actually planned, but I remember just saying like, here's what I can do, like considering myself and being like, here's what I can do. And let's make plans for, exactly this date when we both have free time next. And I remember feeling all of this relief because I actually felt like I was properly understood. Like, I could vocalize my point and share where I was coming from and say, like, I would love to see you. It's not coming from that, but this is just what's going on for me right now. And I could still set the boundary and move from truth. Like, it was true that I wanted to hang out with my mom, but it wasn't true for me in that moment, right? Like, it was like, of course, like, I love and care about my mother. But for me, what I needed more at that time was to love and care for myself a little bit. And I knew that anything outside of that was going to be a form of self-betrayal. So then I started thinking like, wow, I wonder how much I do stuff like this, and how much this is actually navigating so many of my relationships. So this led me to then want to do like a big audit of my life in relationship to guilt. And I tracked for like 2 weeks all the places that I was guilting myself in career, around money, and like thinking, oh, I should pay for other people's stuff, or I should take care of stuff, or, all these places like that. So career, financial, just mentally, emotionally, like anywhere at random. Spiritual guilt can be a big thing for a lot of people, physically, and in relationships. And I sort of broke down relationships into friends, family, and romantic. And I like went through and I really looked at all these different places, and I was like, wow, I'm guilting myself so much more than I ever realized. Like, and I'm moving in my life from a fear of feeling guilty more than I'm moving from truth. Not more like overall, but way more often than I expected. Because I thought like, I know myself, I was doing a lot of work on myself at the time, and I was growing a lot from what I was used to from a few years before that. And I was thinking like, I thought I was good in these areas. And so I realized it's sort of the remedy. Well, I realized another thing too. And it was that when I'm feeling really guilty, I am also seeing other people more than I'm seeing myself. And as somebody who was codependent and enmeshed and had like a very enmeshed family dynamic growing up, that made sense, right? Like, I'm so much more used to being attuned to other people's families as a fearful avoidant as well, right? Or not other people's families, other people in my family than my own feelings, my own needs, my own boundaries. And so it's easy for me to fall into that space. And that, hey, I'm allowed to see myself equally to others. I'm allowed to be like, okay, this is that person's needs. Here's mine. Is there a compromise? And if not, I have to look out for and care for myself too. And if I don't, I'm more likely to get burned out. I'm more likely to feel resentful long term. Like whenever we make decisions that betray ourselves for others, that's a sacrifice. And a sacrifice is a lot different than a compromise. A compromise for me was getting on the phone with my mom and saying, hey, 3 weeks from now, here's our cool plan. Let's do this exciting thing. And in the meantime, let's do a really nice like catch up in a couple days over FaceTime, and we can, have some of that quality time there. And so it allowed for, a compromise, me to consider where my mom was coming from and also what I wanted and needed, but consider myself at that moment being kind of in this like minorly exhausted state at the same time and not wanting to get burnt out. And so I realized like, wow, this is all those different places when I audit my life and see all these decisions that I make where I move through my life to avoid guilt instead of to move from truth. Here, I'm going to do reframes for them, like literal behavioral reframes. I'm going to be like, here's what I'm going to do instead, say instead, here's what my boundary and compromise is going to be instead of just making these like, knee-jerk reaction sacrifices out of fear of having to feel like a bad person or feel guilty. And so this also sparked me being like, I have to work on the core wound, I am bad, right? Which is a big sponsor for guilt. And to work through different codependent types of beliefs, like I am responsible for how other people feel. I will let people down and they won't be okay if I don't support them. Like I had all these sort of codependent beliefs that I was projecting out onto my world, right? And then thinking that I had to take care of all these other things, when people could take care of themselves and show up for themselves, and I could make healthy compromises. And so this helped me move out of this like chronic and perpetual guilt cycle, that was very, very useful. So if this is something you struggle with, there may be a chance that you came from previous codependent relationships, have attachment trauma that resulted in codependency or enmeshed circumstances or dynamics, or just maybe had a lot of guilt dynamics growing up in different forms. And it's, guilt at the end of the day is misaligning you from your truth. And if we move through life out of this fear of being guilty or feeling the feeling of guilt, then we'll keep moving through life in a way that disconnects us and betrays us from who we are and what we need and what we want. And what is actually healthy and interdependent, not codependent, not counterdependent or overly independent, is when we show up and we learn to consider ourselves and consider other people as well and speak through those circumstances or dynamics. So if you want to check out that guilt and shame course that I mentioned for free for 7 days, it guides you through a lot of that reprogramming. It helps you do a guilt audit in the different areas, gives you different questions to ask to get to the bottom of those things. And it also highlights and works through a lot of shame related issues. Maybe I'll do a separate video about shame too. But it helps you work through both guilt and shame. The course is for both. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you're enjoying the more personal shares. And let me know other things that you would like to see or hear in the comments below. Okay, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.